Ladies and gentlemen, we are awaiting a statement from Mr. Bryce Holliwell. The statement will begin momentarily. Ladies and gentlemen. Hey, is this thing on? No, never mind. Better? Okay, very good. Day 832. I need to put this down. 864 days to the 2020 election and 642 days to Inauguration Day. Statement by Mr. Bryce Holliwell, world traveler in PFD. Ladies and gentlemen, and all the rest of you, it is with semi-heavy heart that I announce the end of civilization as we know it. That is why I have the phony backdrop of Paris behind me, because it was in France that civilization began and now ended. As we await the press conference of Mr. William P. Barr to tell us some shit about a report that he won't let us see, has now redacted, and is trying to pawn off to Congress as the real thing, let me remind you that we've seen this before from Mr. Barr. Let me also remind you that he was the mastermind behind one of the greatest criminal conspiracies and cover-ups in the history of the United States of America. With this latest venture into unlawfulness, Mr. Barr has amassed, by my count, 3 strikes, which, if this were a baseball game, he'd be out. But it is not baseball, it is civilization. I can only hope that if civilization is to end, that it should end much the way it found its midpoint, with the French Revolution and the guillotine. However, I'm getting ahead of myself. Last night, we went to see and hear David Sedaris, a very funny man. I have to say, the guy who was sitting directly behind me thought it a good idea to hoot loudly at every cute thing Sedaris said at the beginning of the show. It was not as bad as the fellow who screamed into the microphone, which in turn blasted it out of the speakers at my nephew's soccer game earlier this week. I learned to cover my ears every time the other team scored a goal because the announcement caused me to jump out of my skin. But I have unfortunately wandered off the point here. Where was I? Oh yes, the end of civilization as we know it. This, of course, raises the question, where did it all begin? That is, civilization as we know it. Not all civilization, just civilization as we know it. But first, let me say, before I forget again, the reason for this press conference, and I'd like to thank all of you who came, because I didn't think you were are phony or the enemy of the people. I am, by the way, one of these, but not the other. I'd like to thank WDF for having me on. That's what the fuck? Yes, where was I? Oh yes, civilization as we know it. It began in France, when Francis I asked Leonardo to come live out his remaining years in an old folks' home. Mr. da Vinci did, moving from Italy to France, where he died. Painting in France was transformed from flat, crappy, listless portraits to lush, voluminous representations of reality. And France became the world's leader in sophistication and taste. Maybe not in all things practical. I mean, you gotta wonder about building a place like Versailles and not having any toilets. The French, you gotta love it. We had warnings that civilization was ending, that art and culture was changing, but it took the burning of Notre Dame to symbolize and crystallize it for us. My first thought when I heard the news was, what? No fire suppression system? Alas, Because why put one in? They hadn't needed one in over 800 years, but now we will shed tears and raise money to build a new. Maintain the old? Why bother? It's been there forever. Let someone else do it if they want to. They don't know what they've got till it's gone. That should be a song lyric. It is? Oh. Damn, I'm good. The end of civilization was thought to be when all-out nuclear war happened, and it may still be the case, as was announced in Mad Magazine's takeoff of the Daily News, which they call the Daily Dirt. In that parody, between the announcement of a starlet who got a bruise on her thigh while the apartment building was being robbed, the robbers were in a different unit and she slipped in the shower and bruised herself, and the announcement of 1,000 pieces of furniture for $9.99, one toothpick box and 999 toothpicks, there was a small headline at the bottom of column 6 which said nuclear war declared. At the bottom of that column it said, today Russia and the U.S. declared nuclear war. It then went to the top of column 7 and finished with in small print, which is the end of civilization as we know it. And that's where we are right now. Oh, we saw the signs, we just ignored them. In 1907, the art world was forever changed. Moving pictures came to Paris. The great artists who had gathered in Montmartre realized that representational painting was dead, because a new representational reality was upon them, and they began the long journey looking for a new reality. That journey continues, with its many dead ends and false fronts. Hand in hand with this journey are the manipulators and con men, or should I say, people, con people. I wouldn't want to leave out anyone like Sarah Sanders out of the mix. Yes, the four-flushers and manipulators were there too. They were in a back room scheming to start World War I so Britain could defeat Germany before it became too strong. Then again, during the Spanish War, which led to George Orwell's writing, 1984. Then again after the Korean War with the founding of the John Birch Society, and now with Fox News, Cambridge Analytica. And the vast right-wing conspiracy so accurately identified by Hillary Clinton. Yes, they are still among us. We see yet another installment of heinousness dressed up in legalese and patriotism. But do not be deceived. This is not criminal, unpatriotic, not what our country is all about, or shouldn't be. Not if we wish to remain the grand old gal. I am giving this statement to get out in front of the phony narrative that will be advanced soon by Mr. Barr. He is giving a press conference about a report that no one has seen. He has given a report like this before to Congress and the American people. It was about a memo he wrote telling the old bagman for Nixon, George H.W. Bush, that it was okay to send the FBI into a country to arrest someone without telling the country they were doing it, thus violating the rule of law known as the Charming Betsy. You gotta love that name, don't you? He wrote a memo explaining the memo he had written earlier and now wouldn't let anyone see. It turned out his splaining was all a lie. So we know he's a liar on this sort of thing. Of that, there is no question. He has no credibility, yet he will try to sell it again. Remember, he was also the guy who convinced H.W. Bush to pardon Ollie North and Cap Weinberger and the rest of the criminals involved in the Iran-Contra on Bush's last day in office. This guy will do anything. For what? Not for love, as Meatloaf sang. In fact, Meatloaf said he'd do anything, but he wouldn't do that. Don't worry, Willie Barr will. In fact, I'd like to announce the formation of a new effort, and I'd like to invite Mr. Barr to be, if not the head of it, then the nominal head of it. Judas Inc. With the slogan, if you won't sell us out, we will. Shekels? We don't do it for shekels. Heck, we do it because that is what we do. Ladies and gentlemen, in the next few hours, we will see the end of civilization as we know it. Don't ask God to save us. Save yourself. Save your fellow persons. This has been Bryce Holliwell reporting, speaking live from World Headquarters. 564 days to the 2020 election and 642 days to Inauguration Day. Back to you.